We know about the famous or infamous shot heard around the world from the Lexington Green on April the 19th, 1775. 700 or more British regulars approached the town and were met defiantly by about 70 American Patriot Minutemen. As the Americans turned to leave the field, a shot of unknown origin rang out and the battle began. There was another not so famous but attention getting rifle discharge. Let me tell you about it. Greetings, Patriots. Welcome to God in America, where we connect the faith of our fathers to the freedom of our nation. I'm your host, Perry Greene. Today we're going to explore a strange but true piece of history, how a single pig nearly caused a war between two world powers. It's a story about pride, patience, and providence, and it has a lot to say about how we handle conflict today. On June the 15th, 1859, the setting was the San Juan Islands just between Washington Territory and the British controlled Vancouver Island. At that time, the boundary between the United States and Great Britain was obscure. The 1846 Oregon Treaty had drawn the line through the middle of the channel, separating the islands, but no one had defined which channel that meant. Both nations claimed the same territory. An American farmer named Lyman Cutler lived on one of the islands. He had a potato patch, his pride and joy. But one day he looked out and saw a large black pig rooting through his garden, devouring his potatoes. The pig belonged to a man named Charles Griffin, an Irishman who worked for the British Hudson's Bay Company. Frustrated, Cutler did what many frustrated farmers might have done. He grabbed his rifle, shot the pig. That single shot would echo all the way to London and Washington, D.C. When Griffin discovered what had happened, he demanded compensation, $100. Now, that was a steep sum of money in 1859, but Cutler refused to pay, saying the pig had no business being in his garden. Griffin threatened to have him arrested by British authorities, and that was all it took to ignite a standoff. Soon, American settlers called for military protection, and U.S. troops arrived under Captain George Pickett. Now, that's the same Pickett who would later lead the famous charge at Gettysburg. In response, the British sent warships to the island. For a brief, tense time, the two most significant military powers in the world stood face to face, all because of a dead pig. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed. When news of the standoff reached Washington and London, both governments were embarrassed. Orders came quickly. No shots were to be fired and no blood was to be spilled. For the next 12 years, both nations maintained a joint military occupation of the San Juan Islands. American and British soldiers lived in separate camps just a few miles apart. Over time, they became friendly, sharing supplies, trading goods, and even celebrating holidays together. Finally, in 1872, Emperor Wilhelm I of Germany was asked to arbitrate the dispute. He ruled in favor of the United States, and the boundary was settled peacefully. Not one life had been lost except for the unfortunate pig. It became known as the Pig War in history. While it sounds comical, there's a profound lesson here. Pride and anger can escalate even the most minor conflicts into something much greater unless wisdom and humility step in. The Bible has a lot to say about this. In Proverbs 15, verse 1, we're told, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." That's precisely what happened in the pig war. What started with one man's irritation and another man's pride could have erupted into tragedy, but patience and a refusal to take offense kept peace. James 1, verses 19 and 20 remind us to let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. That's a principle that applies as much to nations as it does to neighbors. When we respond in anger, we lose perspective. When we let our emotions drive us, we risk destroying the very things we value: relationships, unity, and even freedom. Today, we see similar pig wars playing out across America, not over potato patches, but over politics, ideology, and pride. People are quick to shoot, not with rifles, but with words. One post, one headline, one disagreement can spark outrage and division that ripples across the country. Look at the responses to Candace Owens and her remarks about Charlie Kirk's murder. The same spirit that almost turned a farming dispute into a war still lives among us when we choose pride over peace. Jesus said in Matthew 5, verse 9, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Peacemaking doesn't mean weakness. It means strength under control. It's the courage to step back, breathe, and ask, is this worth fighting over? Will this glorify God or feed my pride? Captain Pickett and the British commanders could have let ego dictate their actions, but instead both sides agreed to stand down. Their restraint is why we can laugh about the pig war rather than mourn another tragic chapter in history. In our modern world where tempers flare and patience wears thin, we need that same spirit of restraint. Whether it's in the halls of Congress, our communities, or even our churches, peace begins when someone decides to lay down their pride. The Pig War of 1859 reminds us that it's always possible to choose peace over pride. Well, thanks for joining me today on God in America. May we remember that true strength lies not in our ability to fight, but in our willingness to forgive. Until next time, I'm Perry Greene, reminding you that freedom, like faith, must be guarded with humility and grace. So as we close, let's keep the light of self-restraint burning.